We live in a world that never stops moving. From the moment we wake up to the endless scroll of notifications, the pressure to always be doing something is relentless. Hustle culture tells us that if we're not grinding, we're falling behind, that stillness is laziness and silence is wasted time. But what if the opposite were true? What if the most powerful move you could make is no move at all? The ancient Stoics understood this paradox better than anyone. While today's society equates action with power, thinkers like Marcus Aurelius, one of history's most formidable leaders, practiced the art of strategic stillness. He ruled an empire not by constant motion, but by mastering the pause, the breath between decisions. As Seneca once wrote, sometimes even to live is an act of courage. And sometimes to do nothing is the wisest action of all. Imagine standing at the edge of a storm, watching chaos swirl around you. Most people would rush into the fray, reacting impulsively, desperate to control the uncontrollable. But the Stoics teach us something radical. True control begins with the ability to resist that urge. Epictetus, the former slave turned philosopher, put it simply: we cannot choose our external circumstances, but we can always choose how we respond to them. That choice, the space between stimulus and reaction, is where real power lies. It's the difference between being swept away by the current and standing firm, like a rock in a river, unmoved yet shaping everything around it. This video is about reclaiming that lost philosophy, the quiet strength of stillness as a tool of influence, clarity, and even dominance. We'll explore how Stoic principles can help you harness the power of patience, why strategic inaction often outmaneuvers frantic activity, and how to apply these timeless lessons in a world that never stops shouting. Because here's the truth: the loudest voice in the room is rarely the most powerful. It's the one who knows when to speak, when to wait, and when to let silence do the work for them. If you've ever felt overwhelmed by the demand to always be on, or wondered if there's another way to navigate life's chaos without burning out, this is your invitation to step off the treadmill. To discover how doing less can actually help you achieve more. The human mind craves control. It's how we cope with uncertainty. We convince ourselves that frantic activity will shield us from chaos, that if we just do something, we'll steer the outcome in our favor. But the Stoics saw through this illusion. Epictetus drew a line between what's within our power and what isn't. Our judgments, intentions, and reactions belong to us. External events, other people's actions, even our own bodies, these lie beyond our absolute command. The moment we confuse the two, we trade real influence for the exhausting pretense of control. Think of a CEO facing a company crisis. The easy path is panic, rushed layoffs, knee-jerk rebrands, desperate attempts to look decisive. But the leader who understands Stoic stillness knows better. They pause, they ask, what can I actually control here? Maybe it's not the crashing stock price, but how they communicate with employees. Maybe it's not the competitor's sudden move, but their own team's morale. By resisting the urge to appear in control, they exercise actual control over what matters. This isn't passive surrender, it's strategic clarity. Ancient generals would sometimes hold their ground, letting the enemy exhaust themselves in useless attacks. Today, we face different battles: misinformation spirals, social media outrage, workplace drama. But the principle remains: every unnecessary reaction drains energy better spent elsewhere. Every impulsive move risks collateral damage. So ask yourself, where are you playing chess when you're really just knocking over pieces? Where does your need to feel in control override your ability to be in control? The next time tension rises, practice the Stoic pause. Breathe, discern, act or don't, because sometimes the bravest move isn't forward. It's standing still, eyes open while the storm passes. Patience is often misunderstood as weakness, a passive surrender to circumstances. But in Stoic philosophy, patience is anything but passive. It's a disciplined form of power, a conscious choice to endure discomfort without surrendering to frustration. Marcus Aurelius, the emperor who spent years on war campaigns, wrote in his private journal, "How much more harmful are the consequences of anger and grief than the circumstances which arouse them in us." He wasn't just talking about controlling temper, he was revealing a strategic truth. Haste clouds judgment while patience preserves clarity. Consider two negotiators at a tense business deal. One rushes to fill every silence, conceding points out of sheer discomfort with stillness. The other sits back, comfortable in the pause, knowing that time often reveals more than words ever could. Who holds the real advantage? History is littered with battles won not by the first strike, but by the general who waited, like Fabius Maximus, the Roman leader who outmaneuvered Hannibal's superior forces not through direct confrontation, but by delaying, harassing, and letting the enemy's impatience become their downfall. His strategy was so effective they named it the Fabian tactic, a masterclass in the power of purposeful waiting. This isn't about inaction, it's about timing. The archer doesn't release the arrow the moment the bow is drawn. They wait for the target to align. In our lives, that target might be a difficult conversation, a financial decision, or even a personal goal. Rushing often means missing the mark entirely. So where could patience transform your own battles? Maybe it's resisting the urge to respond to that inflammatory comment online, letting the other person reveal their hand while you keep yours close. Maybe it's pausing before a major purchase, asking not just, "Can I afford this?" but "Will this serve me?" The Stoics remind us that time is a tool, not an enemy. Every delay is an opportunity to gather information, every frustration a chance to practice resilience. The next time you feel the pressure to act, to react, to fill the silence, ask yourself, is this necessity or just noise? Because the strongest moves are often the ones we don't make. There's an underestimated force in the noise of modern life silence. The Stoics didn't just practice it, they weaponized it. Seneca, who tutored the ruthless Emperor Nero, wrote, "Wherever there is a human being, there is an opportunity for kindness, but also for silence." He wasn't advocating muteness, he was revealing a tactical edge. In a world where everyone fights to be heard, the person who masters silence controls the room. Think about the last heated debate you witnessed. The loudest voices often cancel each other out, while the observer who stays quiet, listening, absorbing, choosing their moment, holds the real influence. Now picture a corporate boardroom. Two executives clash over a failing project, each defending their ego rather than solving the problem. The third, a stoic-minded leader, waits. They let the tension expose the other's weaknesses before offering a single, measured suggestion. That's when the room falls silent, not because they spoke louder, but because they spoke less. History's most effective negotiators understand this. The more someone talks, the more power they leak. Every unnecessary word is a crack in their authority. Gossip is another trap. The Stoics saw idle talk as a drain on character and clarity. When you engage in rumors, you trade your integrity for temporary belonging. But when you resist, when you simply listen without contributing, you create something far more valuable: trust. People confide in those who don't weaponize words. A modern example, a manager who refuses to entertain office drama becomes the one person everyone feels safe approaching. Their silence isn't indifference, it's a filter for truth. Even in conflict, silence disarms. Imagine someone insults you online. The instinct is to fire back, to win the exchange, but the Stoic response: pause. Let the insult hang in the air. Without fuel, the other person's anger often burns itself out, exposing their insecurity while you retain dignity. Marcus Aurelius handled empire-shattering betrayals this way, not by lashing out but by asking, "Does this require my energy?" Most times the answer was no, so here's a challenge for one day: track how often you speak without purpose. The offhand complaint, the reflexive opinion, the nervous chatter to fill silence. Then ask, what if you'd said nothing? What power might you have conserved? Because every word you don't waste is energy saved for the ones that truly matter. The Stoics didn't just teach us to speak wisely, they taught us that silence, strategically deployed, isn't empty, it's full of power. Imagine someone throws a rock at you. The pain isn't in the rock itself, it's in how you catch it. Epictetus, the Stoic philosopher who endured slavery, put it bluntly: it's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. He wasn't dismissing suffering, he was revealing a hidden truth. Our power lies not in controlling external events, but in mastering our internal responses. Insults, criticism, even outright hostility, they only gain weight when we choose to carry them. Take the example of a politician facing a barrage of unfair accusations during a live debate. The crowd waits for the fiery rebuttal, the dramatic clapback, but instead the politician smiles slightly, lets the moment pass, and redirects the conversation to policy. The audience leans in. Why? Because non-reaction is magnetic. It signals confidence, not indifference. It says, "Your words don't define me." The Stoics called this apatheia, not apathy, but emotional sovereignty. It's the practice of observing provocations like clouds passing overhead, acknowledging their presence without letting them dictate your inner weather. Here's the challenge: the modern world is engineered to hijack our reactions. Social media thrives on outrage, workplaces reward knee-jerk urgency, and even personal relationships sometimes test our patience. But what if, for just one day, you treated every provocation as an experiment? A colleague takes credit for your idea. A stranger cuts you off in traffic. Instead of tensing, you pause. You ask, does this require my energy? Most times, you'll find the answer is no. The insult only stings if you accept it as truth. The frustration only grows if you feed it. This isn't about suppressing emotions, it's about reclaiming agency. The Stoics didn't advocate numbness, they practiced discernment. Like a bouncer at the door of your mind, you get to decide what deserves entry. Marcus Aurelius journaled about this daily, reminding himself, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength. So next time you feel the heat of a reaction rising, try this. Breathe for 3 seconds, name the emotion. Then ask, will this matter in a week, a year? Often, you'll find the provocation shrinks to nothing. And in that space between stimulus and response, you'll discover something far more valuable than the last word, your peace. Every great chess player knows the value of observation. Before moving a single piece, they study the board, the position of opponents, the potential traps, the hidden opportunities. The Stoics approached life with the same discipline. Marcus Aurelius, who carried the weight of an empire on his shoulders, began each day with a simple ritual, journaling. Not just to record events, but to observe his own mind, to separate facts from fears, signals from noise. He wrote, "The first rule is to keep an untroubled spirit. The second is to look things in the face and know them for what they are." That's the essence of strategic stillness, not avoidance, but acute awareness. Think of a detective at a crime scene. They don't rush to conclusions based on the first piece of evidence. They catalog, they question, they sit with the discomfort of not knowing. Only when the picture becomes clear do they act. Modern life, though, rewards the opposite. We're pressured to have instant opinions, to make snap decisions, to respond to every ping as if it's an emergency. But haste is the enemy of wisdom. Consider a recent choice you regret, maybe an angry text sent too quickly, a purchase made in excitement, a job accepted without scrutiny. What if you'd given yourself just 24 hours of observation first? The Stoics called this Cost of Attention. It's the practice of stepping back to see the full mosaic before placing your tile. Seneca advised his students to pause and weigh every decision, no matter how small, because small choices compound into destinies. A modern example. Warren Buffett, known for his deliberate investing style, famously said, "The stock market is a device for transferring money from the impatient to the patient." He doesn't buy based on headlines. He observes trends, studies fundamentals, waits for mispriced value. That's Stoic stillness in action, letting others panic while you discern. Here's the challenge. For the next 24 hours, treat your mind like a laboratory. When a decision arises, resist the itch to react. Instead, note the variables. What emotions are driving you? What facts are missing? What would happen if you waited an hour, a day, a week? Like Marcus Aurelius with his journal, you're not avoiding action, you're ensuring it's purposeful. Because the most powerful moves aren't born from impulse. They're born from the quiet space between seeing and understanding. There's a critical difference between delay and procrastination. One is fear in disguise, the other is wisdom in action. Seneca captured this perfectly when he wrote, "Timing is everything. A good thing coming too soon can be as worthless as a bad thing." What looks like hesitation to the untrained eye is often strategy in motion. History's greatest negotiators understood this. Picture the tense days before the Treaty of Westphalia in 1648, which ended Europe's 30 Years' War. Diplomats didn't rush to sign the first draft. They let tension simmer, allowed exhaustion to soften rigid positions, and waited for the moment when compromise would stick. That pause wasn't indecision, it was the discipline of delay, turning time into an ally. Now think about your own life. How often have you rushed into a decision, accepting a job offer out of desperation, blurting out words in an argument, buying something impulsively only to regret it later? The irony is, we mistake speed for competence, urgency for importance, but the Stoics recognize that delay isn't about avoiding action, it's about refining it. Like a chef letting a stew simmer to deepen the flavors, or a winemaker aging a barrel to transform bitterness into complexity, strategic waiting elevates outcomes. Consider a modern example, two startups with similar ideas. One rushes to market with a half-finished product, eager to beat competitors. The other spends extra months refining, testing, even watching the first startup's missteps. Which one gains long-term trust? The discipline of delay isn't just about patience, it's about letting reality filter out poor options for you. Every unnecessary yes you avoid today spares you a future no you'll have to explain. Here's your challenge this week. Build one intentional pause into a decision you'd normally rush. A contract you're about to sign, sleep on it. A heated text you're ready to send, save it as a draft for 24 hours. Watch how often the right choice becomes clearer with space, because the Stoic secret isn't just knowing when to act, it's knowing when not to. Marcus Aurelius ruled Rome during one of its most turbulent eras, plagues, wars, betrayals, yet his private writings reveal a mind untouched by chaos. While his empire crumbled at the edges, he anchored himself with a simple practice. Each morning, he'd visualize the day's challenges, not to fear them, but to greet them with steady resolve. You have power over your mind, he reminded himself, not outside events. This wasn't denial, it was defiance. While modern burnout culture tells us to grind harder amidst the storm, the Stoics proposed something radical. Stillness isn't the absence of chaos, it's the ability to stand firm within it. Picture a battlefield. Soldiers clash, arrows fly, yet the general remains still at the center, issuing orders with deliberate calm. That's Stoicism in action. Marcus didn't pretend the wars weren't real. He simply refused to let them invade his inner citadel. Compare that to today's relentless hustle, where we wear exhaustion like a badge of honor, mistaking motion for progress. The average person checks their phone 96 times a day, drowning in a sea of notifications, deadlines, and artificial urgency. The Stoics would ask, how much of this chaos is self-inflicted? How often do we confuse being busy with being effective? Technique matters here. When stress mounts, the Stoics didn't just think positive, they trained their bodies to disrupt the panic cycle. Mindful breathing was their secret weapon. Seneca described it as anchoring the soul to the present, a way to short-circuit the spiral of anxiety. Try it now. Inhale for 4 seconds, hold for 4, exhale for 6. That slight lengthening of the exhale triggers the parasympathetic nervous system, signaling safety to a brain wired for fight or flight. It's not magic, it's physiology. The same principle applies to decision fatigue. Before reacting to a provocation, the Stoics would pause not for minutes, but for breaths. 3 intentional breaths create just enough space to ask, is this reaction necessary? Is it useful? Think back to the last time you felt overwhelmed. Was it the workload itself, or the frantic voice in your head insisting you'd never catch up? The Stoics recognized that most suffering comes not from events, but from our resistance to them. Like a swimmer fighting a current, exhaustion sets in when we oppose reality rather than flow with it. Marcus wrote, "The obstacle is the way," meaning the very chaos we fear can become the ground we stand on. So here's the invitation. Next time the world feels like it's spinning too fast, borrow a page from the Stoic playbook. Stop, breathe, separate the facts from the stories you're telling yourself, because the calm you seek isn't found by escaping the storm, it's built by discovering the stillness within it. Cato the Younger stood at the edge of the Roman Senate, watching as Julius Caesar's forces closed in. His allies begged him to flee, to fight another day, but he refused. Not out of fear, not out of surrender, but because his stillness carried a message heavier than any sword. Some principles are worth dying for, but none are worth compromising. That day, Cato didn't just choose inaction, he turned it into a declaration. The Stoics understood this paradox, that doing nothing can sometimes demand more courage than doing something. Action lets us feel in control. Stillness forces us to confront what we truly value. Fast forward 2,000 years, and the power of strategic silence still resonates. Picture a protest where marchers don't chant or carry signs, they simply stand motionless in front of a courthouse. The absence of movement becomes the story. No slogans are needed when quiet bodies block doors. No speech is required when folded arms speak louder than shouted demands. This is inaction as a weapon, the refusal to engage on others' terms, to play by rules designed to exhaust you. But here's what we often miss. Stillness isn't just for grand gestures. It operates in the quiet corners of everyday life. A parent resisting the urge to intervene in their child's struggle, knowing growth happens in the space between help and hardship. A CEO declining to publicly counter a competitor's smear campaign, recognizing that dignity isn't won in mudslinging matches. Even in personal conflicts, when someone pushes your buttons and every fiber screams to retaliate, the decision not to react becomes a masterclass in self-possession. So ask yourself, where does your instinct to do override your wisdom to wait? What might your silence communicate if you let it? Because sometimes the most powerful statement isn't what you say or do, it's what you refuse to. The next time urgency tugs at you, channel Cotto, pause, ask, is this motion meaningful or just motion for its own sake? The weight of inaction isn't emptiness. It's the gravity of intention. An archer draws their bow, eyes locked on the target, every muscle engaged, every breath controlled. They release the arrow with perfect form. But here's the Stoic twist. Once that arrow leaves the string, its flight is no longer theirs to command. Wind, gravity, even a sudden movement in the crowd could alter its path. Epictetus used this exact metaphor to teach a radical idea. Excellence lies in the shot, not the outcome. The archer's job isn't to guarantee a bullseye, it's to execute each step with skill and integrity. Everything beyond that, it's not just outside their control, it's irrelevant to their worth. Now picture a tennis player in a championship match. They've trained for years, perfecting their serve, studying opponents, visualizing victory. But as the final set begins, their mind fixates on the trophy, the crowd's cheers, the fear of losing. Suddenly, their grip tenses, their footwork falters. The very obsession with winning undermines the fluidity that got them here. This is the paradox of attachment. The more we cling to an outcome, the more we strangle the process that creates it. The Stoics called this amor fati, the love of fate, not passive resignation, but a fierce commitment to pour everything into what you can influence, then embrace whatever results with equal grace. Consider a modern parallel: two job candidates interviewing for the same role. One rehearses answers to impress, agonizing over every word, desperate for approval. The other focuses solely on presenting their authentic skills, knowing the hiring decision rests with factors beyond their control: office politics, budget shifts, even the interviewer's mood that day. Who walks out with dignity intact, regardless of the outcome? The Stoic isn't indifferent to success, they're indifferent to the tyranny of success. They understand that tying self-worth to external validation is like building a house on sand. Every ripple of circumstance threatens its foundation. Here's the challenge: what outcome have you been treating as a measure of your worth? Is it a promotion, a relationship milestone, a number on a scale? Now imagine loosening your grip not on the effort but on the meaning you've attached to the result. Epictetus, born into slavery, knew this better than anyone. Some things are up to us and some are not. Your preparation, your ethics, your persistence, these are your arrows. Where they land, that's the universe's business. The freedom you'll find isn't in guaranteed success, but in knowing that no outcome can diminish the integrity of your shot. The busiest people often accomplish the least. It sounds counterintuitive, but the Stoics knew this truth centuries ago. Marcus Aurelius scribbled in his journal, "Ask yourself at every moment, is this necessary?" He wasn't just tidying his schedule, he was hacking the illusion of productivity. Imagine two gardeners. One frantically plants seeds in every patch of soil, while the other carefully selects the healthiest seedlings, nurtures them with precision, and removes every weed choking their growth. Which harvest thrives? The Stoics argued that life works the same way. Minimalism isn't about having less for the sake of less, it's about creating space for what truly matters to flourish. Take the story of a tech entrepreneur who nearly burned out scaling her startup. She wore busyness like armor, priding herself on 100-hour work weeks, until she stumbled upon Seneca's letters. He wrote, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it." So she experimented. For 1 month, she slashed her to-do list in half, cutting meetings, delegating tasks, and saying no to anything that didn't directly serve her vision. The result: revenue doubled. By removing the noise, she uncovered the signal, the vital few actions that actually moved the needle. This is the paradox of less. Subtraction multiplies. Think of Michelangelo chiseling away at marble to reveal David. He famously said, "Every block of stone has a statue inside it, and it is the task of the sculptor to discover it." Our lives are that block of marble. Every obligation, every distraction, every should cluttering our days is excess stone hiding our masterpiece. The Stoics didn't just advocate minimalism, they weaponized it. When you strip away the non-essential, what remains isn't emptiness, it's potency. So here's your challenge this week. Eliminate one task that feels urgent but isn't truly important. That committee you joined out of guilt, step down. The inbox you check 20 times a day, batch it to 3. Like Marcus Aurelius pruning his obligations to rule effectively, you'll discover that doing less isn't laziness, it's the ultimate leverage. Because when you stop chasing everything, you can finally catch what matters. Impulse is the enemy of intention. Seneca saw this clearly when he wrote, "Most powerful is he who has himself in his own power." He wasn't just talking about resisting temptation, he was revealing a profound truth about human agency. Every time we surrender to an immediate urge, we hand over a piece of our sovereignty. Think of a dieter standing in front of a vending machine, the glow of snack labels whispering promises of temporary pleasure. The moment they reach for their wallet, they're not just choosing chips, they're voting against the future version of themselves who craves health. The Stoics framed this as a micro-battle in the war for self-mastery. Seneca's letters to Lucilius overflow with exercises for temperance, one of his most potent tools. The pause. Before acting on any impulse, he trained himself to step back, not to deny the desire, but to interrogate it. Why does this thing tempt me? What will it cost me tomorrow? This simple act of delay transforms reflex into choice. Modern psychology confirms what Seneca practiced, the 10-minute rule. If you crave something, wait 10 minutes. Often, the urge passes like a cloud because it was never truly yours, just a passing storm of habit or external triggers. Now imagine applying this beyond snacks. A notification pings, your hand twitches toward your phone, a colleague annoys you, your tongue prepares a sharp retort. These are the same impulse loops, just dressed in different contexts. The Stoics would argue that every unchecked reaction, no matter how small, trains your mind to default to autopilot. Like a river carving a canyon, repetition deepens the grooves of impulsivity until resistance feels impossible. But here's the secret: the grooves can be redrawn. Try this experiment for a day. Carry a small notebook or use your phone to track every impulsive urge. The coffee you don't need but buy out of routine. The gossip you jump into without thinking. The unnecessary purchase triggered by an ad. Don't judge or suppress, just observe. Like a scientist collecting data, you'll start noticing patterns. Maybe stress fuels your online shopping. Maybe boredom drives your social media refreshes. Awareness alone weakens impulse's grip because you're no longer sleepwalking through your choices. The deeper lesson: resisting impulses isn't about willpower, it's about clarity. When you pause, you create space to ask, does this align with who I aspire to be? A single moment of stillness can unravel a lifetime of conditioned reactions. That's the Stoic superpower, not fighting every impulse, but choosing which ones deserve your energy. Epictetus once warned that haste is the thief of clarity, a lesson etched into the bones of those who have paid its price. Picture a chess player slamming down pieces in a time scramble, trading long-term strategy for the illusion of speed. The board becomes a graveyard of blunders, each move a monument to impatience. Now zoom out. Life operates by the same rules. Every rushed decision carries hidden interest, compounding over time into consequences we never intended. Take the cautionary tale of a Silicon Valley CEO who pushed a half-finished app to market, desperate to beat competitors. The launch made headlines until glitches erased user data, triggering lawsuits and a humiliating recall. Years later, he admitted the truth. We didn't lack time, we lacked discipline. The competitor we feared launched 6 months later with half our bugs and triple our users. His mistake wasn't the delay he avoided, but the patience he refused to cultivate. The Stoics saw haste as a form of self-sabotage. When we rush, we outsource our judgment to adrenaline, letting primal urgency override reasoned choice. Like a pilot ignoring instrument readings in a storm, we navigate by panic rather than principle. Chess masters understand this intimately. The Grandmaster Savili Tartakawa famously said, "The mistakes are all there waiting to be made." Haste simply helps us find them faster. Now flip the script. Consider the Japanese concept of yukimi in martial arts, the art of falling. Beginners tense up, resisting gravity, often injuring themselves in the process. Experts relax into the descent, using momentum to roll safely back to their feet. Rushed decisions are like stiff falls. The more we fight the natural rhythm, the harder we hit the ground. So here's a challenge. Reflect on a moment when haste cost you more than time. Maybe it was signing a lease in a rush, leading to a year in a noisy apartment. Or sending an angry email that torched a professional bridge. The common thread: these weren't failures of knowledge, they were surrenders to tempo. The antidote isn't complexity, it's the courage to slow down when everything screams speed. Because the irony of haste is this: the people who seem to move fastest are often just circling back to fix what they broke in their hurry. There's a quiet moment before every great performance, the gladiator adjusting his grip on the sword, the sprinter settling into the blocks, the musician taking one last breath before the first note. Seneca, who watched Rome's warriors train, called this the stillness that moves mountains. It wasn't passive waiting, it was preparation distilled to its purest form. The crowd only sees the final clash, the burst from the starting line, the flawless concerto. What they miss is the months, sometimes years, of disciplined silence, the repetitions when no one was watching, the corrections made in empty gyms, the scales practiced behind closed doors. Think of an Olympic swimmer during the off-season. While spectators focus on race day, the real work happens in pre-dawn laps, stroke mechanics analyzed frame by frame, lungs conditioned to endure burning oxygen debt. This is active stillness, the kind of preparation that looks like nothing from the outside but builds everything within. The Stoics revered this phase. Seneca wrote to his friend Lucilius about gladiators who spent more time sharpening their minds than their blades. Fortune favors the prepared, he noted, not because luck magically rewards effort, but because preparation transforms uncertainty into opportunity. When the moment comes, the prepared don't hesitate, they execute. Now shift the lens to your own life, that project you've been postponing because you're not ready. The skill you admire but tell yourself you'll learn someday. The Stoic approach flips this script. Readiness isn't a precondition, it's the result of starting before you feel prepared. Consider the novelist drafting pages no one will ever see, the entrepreneur testing failed prototypes, the public speaker rehearsing in front of a mirror. Their power doesn't come from avoiding the awkward phase, it comes from embracing it as sacred ground. Here's the challenge: identify one area where you've been waiting for permission to begin. Maybe it's a career shift, a difficult conversation, or a creative pursuit. Now carve out 20 minutes today for what Seneca called invisible labor, the work that won't earn applause yet but builds the foundation for everything that will. Because the secret isn't to wait until you're fearless, it's to prepare until fear becomes irrelevant. A room falls silent when a calm person enters it. Not because they've demanded attention, but because their presence radiates an unshakable authority, the kind that can't be manufactured or faked. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher-emperor who steered Rome through war and plague, understood this better than anyone. He wrote in his private journal, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." That's the heart of it. True leadership begins with ruling yourself before you presume to guide others. Consider two managers in a high-pressure company. One paces during meetings, interrupts with frantic solutions, and shoots off emails in all caps when deadlines loom. Their team mirrors the chaos. Mistakes multiply, morale plummets, and turnover spikes. The other manager, they listen more than they speak. When crisis hits, they don't react, they pause, then respond with measured clarity. Their team absorbs that energy like a shock absorber, turning tension into focus. Studies back this up. Teams with emotionally steady leaders show higher productivity, creativity, and loyalty. Calm isn't just a personality trait, it's a strategic advantage. History's most effective leaders wielded this power deliberately. When George Washington faced mutiny among his troops at Newburgh, he didn't shout or threaten. He simply put on his reading glasses, a gesture so ordinary yet disarming, and said, "Gentlemen, you will permit me to put on my spectacles, for I have grown not only gray but almost blind in the service of my country." The room, brimming with rebellion, dissolved into silence. His calmness didn't suppress their anger, it outmatched it. Now think of someone in your own life who embodies this quiet authority. Maybe it's a teacher who could silence a rowdy classroom with a glance, or a grandparent whose steady presence made childhood storms feel manageable. What made their calm so compelling? Chances are it wasn't the absence of emotion, it was the mastery of it. They proved that strength isn't loud, it's the ability to hold space for chaos without being consumed by it. The next time you feel pressure to meet frenzy with frenzy, remember, the most powerful person in the room isn't the one reacting, it's the one who chooses not to. Every courtroom holds a moment of profound power, the pause between testimony and verdict. The judge doesn't rush to judgment, they step back, weigh evidence, and let clarity emerge from silence. Epictetus, the Stoic philosopher who turned adversity into wisdom, called this examining your impressions. He taught that between an event and our reaction lies a sacred space, a gap where freedom resides. Most people never tap into it. They let external pressures hijack their inner courtroom, rendering verdicts based on hearsay rather than truth. But the Stoics knew, the quality of your life depends on how you use that pause. Think of the last time you reacted in anger or made a decision you later regretted. Chances are you skipped the deliberation phase. Now picture a judge doing the same, banging the gavel the moment the prosecution rests its case. Justice would crumble, yet we do this daily, sentencing ourselves to poor choices because we confuse speed with decisiveness. Here's the irony: slowing down doesn't mean indecision. It means precision, like a sculptor chiseling away excess stone to reveal the form within. A pause removes the noise obscuring your wisdom. Epictetus offered a practical tool for this. When faced with a triggering event, an insult, a financial loss, a betrayal, he advised students to mentally step back, as if observing from a mountaintop. Is this event truly good or bad, or merely your judgment labeling it so? Modern psychology echoes this. Studies show that even a 90-second pause between stimulus and response disrupts the amygdala's panic cycle, allowing the prefrontal cortex, the brain's judge, to regain control. So here's your challenge. For the next week, insert a 5-minute pause before any significant decision. Not just the big ones, career moves or relationships, but the small, habitual choices that shape your days. That email draft seething with frustration, save it, set a timer, take a walk. The expensive impulse purchase at checkout, leave the cart, wander the store, then ask, does this align with the life I'm building? You'll start noticing something radical. Most urgent decisions aren't urgent at all. They're just dressed in crisis clothing. The Stoics didn't worship inaction. They revered intentional action. Like a judge's deliberation, the pause isn't empty space. It's where wisdom fills the room. There's a hidden discipline in knowing how much of yourself to reveal and when. Seneca captured this perfectly when he wrote, "We should always allow some time to elapse, for time discloses the truth." He wasn't just talking about patience. He was revealing a tactical principle the Stoics called reserve, the art of holding back energy until the moment it matters most. Picture a seasoned boxer in the ring. They don't swing wildly at every opening. They conserve their stamina, studying their opponent's patterns, waiting for the split second when a well-placed strike will land with maximum impact. That's reserve in action, not hoarding strength but investing it with precision. Now think about your own life. How often do you expend energy on battles that don't serve you? The coworker who baits you into petty arguments, the social media debates that leave you drained, the overcommitments you make out of guilt or fear of missing out. Each of these is a leak in your reservoir, a drop of potential wasted on what the Stoics called adiaphora, things indifferent to your true purpose. Seneca warned his students about this, comparing life to a ship's voyage. If one doesn't know to which port one is sailing, no wind is favorable. Without reserve, we're like ships tossing anchor at every passing island, never reaching our destination. The modern world magnifies this challenge. Notifications demand instant responses. Trends pressure us to weigh in on every controversy. FOMO convinces us that saying no means being left behind. But the Stoic practice of reserve flips this script. It's not about disengaging. It's about discerning where your energy will actually move the needle. Consider a CEO in a high-stakes negotiation. They don't reveal their bottom line in the first 5 minutes. They listen, probe, and only deploy their leverage when it counts. Or a parent navigating a teenager's outburst, reacting in kind, escalates the storm, while measured silence often diffuses it. So here's the challenge. Track your energy expenditures for a day like a financial audit. Notice where you're overdrawing your account on trivialities. That heated group chat, the perfectionism spent on a low-priority task, the emotional labor poured into someone else's crisis. Reserve isn't selfishness, it's stewardship. Like a gardener watering roots instead of spraying leaves, it's about directing resources where they'll grow something meaningful. The next time you feel pulled to react, ask Seneca's question, is this essential or just noise? Because the power you conserve today becomes the leverage you wield tomorrow. Retreat sounds like surrender, a word tinged with shame in a world that glorifies relentless forward motion. But history's greatest strategists knew better. Cato the Younger, the Stoic senator who defied Julius Caesar's tyranny, didn't just stand his ground, he mastered the art of tactical withdrawal. When outmatched in battle, he'd regroup in the mountains, turning retreat into recalibration. His enemies mistook these movements for weakness, but Cato understood. Sometimes stepping back is the only way to step forward with greater force. The Stoics called this anachoresis, the wisdom of strategic retreat, not as defeat, but as a deliberate pause to reclaim advantage. Consider how nature operates. A forest fire seems catastrophic, yet it clears space for new growth. Rivers flood their banks only to retreat and replenish the soil. Even our bodies demand retreat. Sleep isn't optional downtime. It's when muscles rebuild and memories consolidate. Modern society, though, treats retreat as failure. We applaud the entrepreneur who skips vacations, the student who pulls all-nighters, the artist who burns through creativity without recharge. But look closer. Some of history's most transformative ideas emerged from forced pauses. Isaac Newton developed calculus while secluded during the Great Plague. Nietzsche wrote his seminal works in the quiet of the Swiss Alps. Retreat wasn't their setback, it was their catalyst. Today, forward-thinking companies are rediscovering this principle through sabbaticals. Adobe offers 4-week resets for tenured employees, reporting a 30% spike in innovation post-break. Basecamp mandates month-long pauses between projects, finding that teams return with sharper focus and fewer errors. These aren't perks, they're performance tools. Like Cotto's tactical withdrawals, they acknowledge that constant engagement drains potency. The mind, like a bowstring, loses tension when never unstrung. So here's your challenge. Plan a retreat, not someday, but concretely. It could be as simple as a screen-free Sunday, a solo hike, or a week where you delegate tasks to create mental space. Ask, where am I pushing forward out of habit rather than strategy? What might I see if I stepped back for just 3 days? Because the paradox of retreat is this: in stillness, momentum is born. The path ahead clarifies only when we stop long enough to look up from the grind. A surgeon never multitasks, not when a life is in their hands. Every movement is deliberate, every ounce of attention channeled into the incision, the suture, the pulse beneath their fingers. Distraction isn't just inefficient here, it's lethal. Epictetus, the Stoic who turned adversity into wisdom, saw this same principle in everyday life. If you seek truth, you will not seek victory by dishonorable means, and if you find truth, you will become invincible. His message cuts deeper than it seems. Truth, whether in philosophy or surgery, isn't found in fragments. It demands your full presence, your undivided attention. We've convinced ourselves that multitasking is a skill, a badge of productivity, but neuroscience paints a different picture. The brain doesn't truly multitask, it switches tasks rapidly, each transition burning glucose and time. A study at Stanford found heavy multitaskers performed worse on memory tests and struggled to filter irrelevant information. They weren't doing more, they were doing everything poorly. The Stoics anticipated this 2,000 years ago. They practiced prosouch attention as a discipline, not just during meditation, but in conversation, in labor, even in meals. To them, presence wasn't passive, it was the ultimate act of respect for the moment. Think of a master pianist performing a concerto. Their fingers fly across keys, but their mind isn't juggling dinner plans or tomorrow's meeting. It's fully immersed in the flow of notes, the pressure of each key, the silence between phrases. That's the power of single tasking. It transforms routine actions into artistry. Now imagine applying that focus to your own work. A report written without checking emails every 3 minutes. A conversation where your phone stays pocketed, your eyes never darting to a screen. The difference isn't just in output quality, it's in the quiet satisfaction of doing one thing well. Here's your challenge. For the next hour, choose a single task, not something passive like watching TV, but an activity that benefits from depth. Writing, cooking, even a walk without headphones. Notice how often your mind tries to hijack your attention, pulling you toward distractions. Don't judge it, just gently return to the task, like the surgeon recentering on the incision. You might discover what the Stoics knew. Presence isn't just about efficiency. It's about reclaiming the richness of experience that fragmentation steals. Because a life lived in halves is never fully lived at all. Confidence whispers while insecurity shouts. That's a truth Marcus Aurelius lived daily as he ruled Rome, a man who needed no audience to affirm his worth. In his private writings, he posed a question that cuts to the core of quiet self-assurance. If you are pained by external things, it is not they that disturb you, but your own judgment of them. There's the Stoic key. Validation isn't found in applause or titles, but in the unshakable knowledge that you've judged yourself rightly. The emperor who could have demanded constant praise instead sought only the approval of his own principles. Now picture two leaders in a boardroom. One dominates conversations, name-drops accomplishments, and reacts defensively to any hint of criticism. The other listens intently, speaks sparingly, and when they do, their words carry weight because they're not diluted by desperation. Which one commands respect? Loudness often masks doubt, like a small dog barking to compensate for its size. True confidence, though, operates differently. It's the quiet hum of a well-tuned engine, not the backfire of a revved exhaust. Studies on leadership bear this out. Teams rate calm, measured executives as more competent than their volatile counterparts, even when both deliver similar results. Here's the modern trap. We've confused visibility with value. Social media trains us to treat silence like failure. If you're not posting, you're fading. But the Stoics measured influence differently. Consider the Roman general Gaius Marius, who reformed the military not by seeking credit, but by focusing on results. While rivals clamored for recognition, he rebuilt legions in obscurity. When his reforms proved unstoppable, no propaganda was needed. His work spoke louder than any speech. Your challenge is this: for one day, track how often you seek external validation. The edited photo you hesitate to post until it gets enough likes, the joke you retell to prove it was funny. The resume bullet point crafted to impress rather than reflect. Each is a tiny surrender of sovereignty. Marcus Aurelius warned, "It never ceases to amaze me. We all love ourselves more than other people, but care more about their opinion than our own." The next time you feel the itch to prove yourself, pause. Ask, who am I trying to convince, and why? Real confidence isn't broadcast, it radiates. Like a tree doesn't announce its growth, it simply stands tall, roots deepening in silence. Words are like currency. The more you spend carelessly, the less value each one carries. Seneca saw this clearly when he advised, "Speech should be like precious gold, valuable not in quantity, but in weight." The Stoics didn't just preach brevity, they weaponized it. In a world where politicians filibuster and social media rewards endless scrolling, concise speech becomes an act of rebellion. It's not about saying less for the sake of silence, but distilling thought to its purest form so every syllable lands with intention. Take Lincoln's Gettysburg Address, just 272 words that reshaped a nation's conscience. While the featured speaker that day, Edward Everett, droned on for 2 hours with flowery oration, Lincoln's 3-minute speech became immortal. Why? Because he understood the Stoic principle of economy. Remove everything unnecessary until only truth remains. The speech doesn't mention battle strategies or political factions. It cuts straight to the marrow of sacrifice and unity. That's the power of restraint. When you strip away excess, what's left isn't emptiness, it's resonance. Modern communication drowns in noise, emails padded with corporate jargon, meetings that circle without conclusion, tweets stretched into threads, all symptoms of what Seneca called the disease of the ears. People mistake volume for substance, as if word count equals wisdom, but the Stoics knew better. When Zeno founded Stoicism, his teachings were so concise they could fit on a single scroll. Epictetus didn't write volumes. His student Arion recorded his lectures in short, punchy discourses designed to be memorized and lived. Brevity wasn't stylistic, it was survival. Here's how to practice this today. Next time you draft an email, slash the word count by half. Notice how it forces clarity. before speaking in a meeting, mentally frame your point in one sentence. You'll find filler words evaporate when every syllable must earn its place. Even in conflict, concision disarms. A sharp, "I disagree, and here's why," carries more weight than a rambling monologue of qualifications. The real test: try summarizing your core beliefs in 3 sentences, not as a platitude, but as a creed so distilled it could guide you through chaos. That's Stoic rhetoric at work, not the absence of words, but the presence of meaning. Because when you master economy, silence isn't what's left when you stop talking. It's the space your words leave to echo. There's a quiet strength in accepting what we cannot change, not with resignation, but with clear-eyed grace. The Stoics called this amor fati, the love of fate. Epictetus, who endured the brutality of slavery, framed it as the ultimate act of agency. Do not seek for things to happen the way you want them to. Rather, wish that what happens happen the way it happens, then you will be happy. At first glance, this sounds like passive surrender, but look closer. Acceptance isn't about giving up. It's about stepping out of a futile struggle with reality so you can engage with it on wiser terms. Consider a patient diagnosed with a chronic illness. The initial reaction might be rage, bargaining, or denial, a fight against the unchangeable. But the moment they shift to acceptance, something unexpected happens. Energy once wasted on "why me" redirects toward adaptation. They research treatments, adjust routines, even find humor in the struggle. This isn't defeat, it's tactical realignment. Like a sailor who stops fighting the wind and instead adjusts the sails, they trade exhaustion for forward motion. Studies of chronic pain patients reveal this paradox. Those who practice acceptance report higher quality of life than those who cling to the hope of a cure that may never come. Their pain doesn't disappear, but their suffering diminishes because they've stopped amplifying it with resistance. History offers a striking parallel in Admiral James Stockdale, shot down over Vietnam and imprisoned for 7 years. Tortured routinely, he credited Stoicism for his survival. You must never confuse faith that you will prevail in the end, which you can never afford to lose, with the discipline to confront the most brutal facts of your current reality, he later wrote. Stockdale didn't pretend his captivity wasn't horrific. He accepted it fully, which freed him to focus on what he could control, communicating in code with other prisoners, memorizing their names to preserve morale, even tapping Stoic mantras on the cell walls. His acceptance wasn't weakness, it was the foundation of his resilience. Now turn the lens inward. What reality are you wrestling with right now? A job loss you can't reverse, a relationship that ended despite your efforts, the aging of a body that no longer performs as it once did. Resistance here isn't just futile, it's expensive. Every moment spent raging against the unchangeable is a moment stolen from building what's possible within those constraints. The artist who accepts their limited eyesight learns to paint with bolder strokes. The entrepreneur whose product failed pivots to a wiser venture. Even grief, when fully allowed, becomes a bridge to deeper connection rather than a prison of despair. Try this reframe. What if the obstacle isn't the circumstance itself, but your refusal to meet it as it is? The Stoics practiced premeditatio malorum, imagining worst-case scenarios, not to dwell in pessimism, but to rehearse acceptance in advance. When disaster struck, they weren't caught off guard. They'd already made peace with the possibility. That's the secret. Acceptance isn't the end of the road. It's the starting point for walking it with eyes wide open. So ask yourself, where is your resistance costing you more than your reality ever could? And what might you gain if you stopped fighting the tide and learned to swim with it instead? There's an undeniable magnetism to the person who refuses to be rattled by life's petty provocations. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher king who faced endless palace intrigues, wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." He wasn't just advocating indifference, he was revealing a profound social alchemy. When you decline to engage with trivialities, you don't just avoid distraction, you elevate your stature. Think of a celebrity confronted with tabloid rumors. The ones who lash out or issue frantic denials keep the story alive, while those who respond with serene silence. Their refusal to play the game becomes the headline. The gossip doesn't define them, their restraint does. This principle extends far beyond fame. Consider two co-workers. One obsessively monitors office politics, leaping into every minor conflict, while the other focuses solely on meaningful work. Over time, the first becomes background noise, a constant reactor. The second, their calm presence commands respect because it signals priorities. Like a mountain unaffected by the wind, their stillness doesn't imply weakness, it demonstrates a higher vantage point. Studies on workplace dynamics confirm this. Employees perceived as emotionally steady are more likely to be promoted, not because they're the loudest, but because they're seen as anchors amid chaos. The Stoics called this apatheia, not apathy, but emotional sovereignty. It's the practice of treating minor provocations like mosquitoes, annoying but unworthy of your lifeblood. Marcus Aurelius journaled about this daily, reminding himself that the best revenge is to be unlike your enemy. When someone insults you and you refuse to take the bait, you're not conceding, you're revealing their irrelevance. History's most respected figures mastered this. Gandhi didn't counter British ridicule with more ridicule. His silent marches spoke volumes. Rosa Parks didn't shout to claim her seat. Her quiet defiance shook a nation. Pettiness only gains power when we grant it attention. Here's the challenge: grab a notebook and list 3 things that no longer deserve your reaction. Maybe it's the neighbor's passive-aggressive comments, the online troll craving engagement, or the colleague who exaggerates minor slights. Next to each, write what you'll do instead: a deep breath, a mental shrug, or simply moving on. Test it for a week. Notice how much energy you reclaim when you stop feeding what doesn't matter, because the ultimate power move isn't winning every battle, it's choosing which battles are worth your presence. Silence isn't just the absence of noise, it's a strategic force. The Stoics understood this better than most. Picture a heated debate in ancient Athens, where philosophers clashed over truth like gladiators in an arena of ideas. One speaker, fueled by ego, hurls insults and grand pronouncements. The Stoic opponent, they stand still, absorbing the barrage without reaction. The crowd leans in, waiting for the counterpunch, but none comes. Just quiet, the aggressive speaker stumbles, their words echoing hollowly in the space left unanswered. That's when the lesson lands. The louder someone fights to dominate, the more power they surrender to the one who refuses to play. This principle transcends philosophy. Modern negotiators call it the power of the pause. In high-stakes deals, the first person to fill the silence often loses leverage. Imagine a salary discussion where your employer lowballs an offer. Most people rush to justify their worth, or worse, accept too quickly out of discomfort. But the negotiator trained in Stoic stillness, they let the number hang in the air, maintaining eye contact without speaking. The discomfort builds, not for them but for the other side. Suddenly, the employer starts revising the offer upward, not because they were convinced, but because silence created room for doubt to grow. Space, strategically deployed, becomes a mirror, forcing others to confront their own uncertainty. Even nature operates this way. A forest doesn't fight wildfires, it uses the cleared space to regenerate stronger roots. Boxers know that leaning into a punch multiplies its force, while a slight backward step can make the attacker overextend and lose balance. The Stoics saw human conflict the same way. When confronted with aggression, whether in words or actions, our instinct is to push back. But the true tactician knows that yielding ground isn't surrender. It's a way to let the opponent's momentum work against them. Try this experiment today. In your next conversation, resist the urge to immediately fill gaps. When someone finishes speaking, count 2 full seconds before responding. Notice how the dynamic shifts. The other person might reveal more than intended, backtrack, or even rephrase their position to fill the void you've created. This isn't manipulation, it's the art of allowing others the space to think, not just react. The Stoic teacher Musonius Rufus put it plainly: we have 2 ears and 1 mouth, so we can listen twice as much as we speak. Mastering this skill requires rewiring a lifetime of social conditioning. We're taught that quick responses signal intelligence, that interrupting shows engagement. But watch any courtroom drama. The most damning testimonies often come after a prolonged pause, when witnesses unravel under the weight of their own words. The same applies to parenting, leadership, even social media. A tweet left unanswered often exposes the emptiness of the attack better than any rebuttal. So where can you apply this today? That colleague who dominates meetings with half-baked ideas, let their proposals sit unchallenged for a beat. The relative who baits you into political arguments, respond with genuine curiosity instead of counter-arguments. Tell me more about why you believe that, followed by attentive silence, does more to diffuse conflict than any debate tactic. Because here's the secret: people don't fear being wrong, they fear being ignored. When you grant them space instead of resistance, you don't just disarm their aggression, you reveal its hollowness. The next time tension rises, remember the Stoics' greatest weapon isn't a clever retort or a show of force. It's the courage to do nothing and let the empty space do the work for you. Certainty has a stillness all its own, a quiet confidence that cuts through the chaos of constant motion. Seneca captured this when he wrote, "If one does not know to which port one is sailing, no wind is favorable." That's the paradox of conviction. The clearer your purpose, the fewer unnecessary actions you take. Imagine a scientist conducting a groundbreaking experiment, while others might rush to tweak variables or force premature conclusions. The true researcher stands firm in the process. They know some truths can't be hurried, data must mature, controls must hold, and patience isn't just a virtue, it's the bedrock of discovery. Their stillness isn't indecision, it's the confidence that the right answer will reveal itself in time. This principle transcends laboratories. Think of a novelist who spends years refining a manuscript, resisting the pressure to publish before the story's ready. Or an investor who ignores market hysteria, holding steady while others panic sell. Their power doesn't come from frenetic activity, it comes from the clarity of their standards. The Stoics called this proherses, the ability to distinguish between what's within your control and what isn't, then acting only on the former. When you're certain of your values, you stop reacting to every distraction. Like a tree with deep roots, you might sway in the storm, but you won't uproot for passing winds. Now consider your own life. How much energy do you waste on decisions that don't align with your core principles? The endless scroll of trivial choices: what to wear, how to respond to petty criticism, whether to chase the latest trend, can drain your reserves if you lack a compass. But when you're anchored to something unshakable, those decisions make themselves. Rosa Parks didn't deliberate whether to give up her seat. Her conviction made the choice inevitable. Steve Jobs didn't poll consumers about minimalist design. He knew what excellence required and ignored the noise. Here's the challenge: identify one principle you refuse to compromise. It could be as simple as "I will never rush to judgment," or as profound as "I will measure success by integrity, not income." Write it down. Then, the next time you feel pulled in conflicting directions, let that principle decide for you. Watch how much mental clutter evaporates when your non-negotiables are clear, because the stillness of certainty isn't about having all the answers. It's about knowing which questions are worth answering. Epictetus described the mind as a fortress with a gatekeeper, your attention. If someone hands you a thought, he taught, ask yourself, is this necessary? Is this true? Before allowing anything to cross the threshold, you must examine it like a sentry at the gates. That's the discipline of attention in its purest form, not just focusing, but curating what deserves focus. In a world where the average person touches their phone over 2,000 times a day, this ancient practice feels almost revolutionary. Our modern gatekeepers are overwhelmed, letting every notification, headline, and algorithmic nudge storm the gates unchecked. The result, a mind cluttered with tenants who pay no rent, thoughts that occupy space without adding value. Consider how differently two people experience the same commute. One spends the train ride scrolling through a blur of news alerts, social updates, and half-read articles, arriving at work mentally fragmented. The other gazes out the window, noticing the play of light on buildings, reflecting on yesterday's conversation, or simply breathing. Both had 20 minutes, only one truly owned them. The Stoics recognized this distinction long before neuroscience confirmed it. What you attend to doesn't just fill your time, it shapes your identity. As Marcus Aurelius wrote in his private notes, your mind takes the color of your thoughts. Here's the modern tragedy: we've outsourced our gatekeeping. Apps are engineered to hijack attention with variable rewards, the dopamine-fueled slot machine effect of endless scrolls. Meetings default to multitasking, mistaking presence for productivity. Even leisure becomes a checklist of content consumption, as if rest requires justification. Contrast this with Seneca's advice to his friend Lucilius. Set aside certain hours for stillness, and in them, do nothing but learn to do nothing. Not meditation in the formal sense, but the radical act of reclaiming mental sovereignty. Try a simple audit. For one day, track every demand on your attention, not just tasks, but the mental chatter they spawn. Notice how often you switch contexts, how many tabs your brain keeps open in the background. Then, conduct a digital triage. Delete one app that fragments your focus. Turn off non-essential notifications. Designate 30 minutes as a Seneca hour, no inputs, just observation or reflection. You'll quickly spot the difference between what's urgent and what's sacred. The real test comes when you ask, what in my life merits undivided attention? Not the performative focus of busyness, but the deep focus that leaves no room for intruders. Is it your child's story about their day, told without your phone in hand? The strategic problem at work that requires uninterrupted thought? Or perhaps the quiet joy of a meal savored without screens? Epictetus' gatekeeper wasn't just filtering distractions, he was guarding the space where meaning unfolds. Your attention is the currency of your values. Spend it where it truly belongs. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The universe is change, our life is what our thoughts make it." There's profound wisdom in those words, a reminder that resistance to change is like trying to hold back a river with your bare hands. The water will flow whether you fight it or not, but here's the paradox the Stoics understood. Letting go isn't surrender, it's a refined form of control. When you release your grip on what you can't command, you free up energy to cultivate what you can. Picture a gardener standing before an overgrown shrub. Their shears hover, not out of hesitation but precision. Every cut is deliberate, not to harm the plant but to redirect its growth. The branches that fall aren't losses, they're invitations for new life. The Stoics approached life the same way. They knew that clinging to dead ideas, expired relationships, or outdated versions of yourself doesn't preserve anything. It just starves what's trying to grow. Seneca put it bluntly, you must let go of the life you plan to live, the life that's waiting for you. Think of a CEO who built their identity around a failing product. The harder they cling to it, the more they ignore emerging opportunities. But the moment they let go, not of their vision, but of their attachment to a single path, they unlock innovation. Or consider a parent releasing their child's hand on the first day of school. That ache isn't weakness, it's the cost of nurturing independence. Even nature operates this way. A forest fire isn't destruction, it's the ecosystem's way of clearing space for sunlight to reach new saplings. Now turn the lens inward. What's one thing you're gripping too tightly? Maybe it's an old grievance that no longer serves you, a career path that's become a cage, or even a self-image that feels increasingly strained. The Stoics would ask, what's this attachment costing you? Not just in time or energy, but in the unseen opportunities it's crowding out. Like the gardener's shears, release isn't about loss, it's about making room for what's next. So here's your challenge. Name one thing to let go of this week, not with resentment, but with the quiet certainty of someone who trusts the river's flow. Write it down, then watch how the space it leaves transforms not just what you've released, but what remains. Waiting seems like weakness in a world obsessed with speed, but history's greatest strategists knew better. Cato the Younger, the Stoic senator who defied Julius Caesar's rise, didn't just resist tyranny, he mastered the art of timing. While others rushed into doomed rebellions, Cato bided his time, building alliances, studying his opponent's weaknesses, and waiting for the moment when his stand would carry maximum weight. His contemporaries mistook this patience for hesitation, but Cato understood. Premature action is just another form of surrender. The true test of strategy isn't how fast you move, it's knowing when stillness serves your purpose better than motion. Consider a tech startup poised to launch a revolutionary product. The temptation is to rush to market, fueled by fear of competitors or investor pressure. But the founders who grasp Stoic patience do something radical. They wait, they refine. They let early rivals stumble through public beta tests, absorbing their mistakes like Cato observing Caesar's overreaches. When they finally enter the arena, their product isn't just functional, it's polished. Their messaging isn't just loud, it's precise. Timing, in these cases, isn't luck, it's discipline. Like a hunter letting the prey come into range, they understand that victory often belongs to those who can endure the tension of the wait. This principle transcends business. Think of a novelist sitting on a manuscript for months, resisting the itch to publish until every paragraph hums with intention, or a protest movement withholding its most powerful actions until public attention is primed to receive them. Even nature operates this way. A bamboo forest spends years growing roots underground before exploding upward in weeks. What looks like delay is actually accumulation. The Stoics called this kairos, the opportune moment. Not just any time, but the right time when conditions align to magnify your impact. Now turn the lens inward. Where are you rushing when patience would serve you better? Maybe it's pushing for a promotion before mastering the required skills, or demanding answers in a relationship that needs space to unfold. Impatience often masquerades as ambition, but the Stoics saw through the illusion. Seneca warned, there is nothing so certain as that the evils of haste are greater than the evils of delay. Here's your challenge. Identify one area where you've been mistaking speed for progress. Is it the business plan you keep tweaking instead of launching? The difficult conversation you avoid because the timing never feels perfect. Write it down. Then ask, what would Cotto do? Sometimes the bravest move isn't charging forward. It's standing still until your advance carries the weight of inevitability. Still waters run deep, not because they lack motion, but because their power lies beneath the surface. Seneca captured this truth when he wrote, "A great mind is a great stillness." He wasn't praising silence for its own sake. He was revealing a master's secret. True expertise doesn't announce itself with fanfare. It hums quietly in the space between actions, like a maestro lifting their baton before the first note. Watch any world-class conductor. Their movements aren't frantic or exaggerated. A slight tilt of the wrist, a barely perceptible shift in posture, and the entire orchestra responds. Their authority doesn't come from theatrics. It comes from the certainty that every gesture carries weight. Think of a master carpenter selecting a chisel. They don't rush or second-guess. Their hands move with the quiet assurance of someone who's shaped 1,000 pieces of wood. Contrast this with an amateur hacking away in hurried strokes, desperate to see immediate results. The difference isn't just skill, it's the relationship with time. Depth requires patience, and patience thrives in stillness. A violinist doesn't learn vibrato by watching the clock. They surrender to the repetition until their fingers intuit the pressure needed without conscious thought. Modern culture often mistakes visibility for mastery. Social media rewards the illusion of expertise, quick tips, surface-level hacks, the appearance of busyness. But the Stoics measured progress differently. Seneca spent years studying philosophy before ever writing a word. When he finally did, his letters weren't performative lectures. They were distilled wisdom, refined through decades of contemplation. The same principle applies today. Consider a software engineer debugging complex code. The junior developer frantically tries every solution they can Google. The senior engineer, they pause, trace the problem upstream, and often find the root cause lies not in the error itself, but in the assumptions surrounding it. Here's the invitation: choose one skill, just one where you'll pursue depth over visibility. Maybe it's your craft, a language, or even the art of listening. For the next month, resist the urge to showcase your progress. Instead, embrace the quiet rigor of practice without applause. Let your journal be your only audience, your mistakes your best teachers. Notice how stillness sharpens your perception, how you start catching nuances that once slipped past you, because mastery isn't built in the spotlight. It's forged in the shadows, where the only witness is your own commitment. The world will hear the music soon enough. First, learn to conduct the silence. Patience, silence, detachment, and preparation, these are the 4 pillars of Stoic stillness, each a quiet rebellion against the chaos of our times. They aren't passive traits, but disciplined choices. Patience isn't waiting idly. It's the art of letting time reveal what haste obscures. Silence isn't the absence of speech. It's the refusal to lend your energy to what doesn't deserve it. Detachment isn't indifference. It's the clarity to distinguish between what you can change and what you must accept. And preparation, it's the invisible labor that turns stillness into strength, the way an archer's steady breath precedes the arrow's flight. Together, they form a philosophy of power that doesn't shout, it endures. Consider how these principles intersect in everyday life. A patient investor ignores market panic, holding firm while others sell low. A silent leader listens while rivals exhaust themselves in debates. A detached artist creates without craving applause, trusting the work's inherent value. And the prepared mind, it meets chaos not with fear, but with practiced calm. The Stoics knew what modern science confirms. The loudest actions often yield the weakest results, while strategic stillness compounds over time. Like a tree growing unseen, roots deepening in darkness before the trunk rises to light, Real influence builds beneath the surface. Marcus Aurelius left us a compass for this way of being. Nothing happens to any man that he is not formed by nature to bear. The universe is change. Our life is what our thoughts make it. That's the heart of it. Stillness isn't about resisting life's rhythm, but moving with it. Waves crash, storms rage, yet the ocean remains unshaken because it knows its depth. Your mind can do the same. Here's where philosophy meets practice. Grab a journal and name one area where you'll cultivate stillness this week. Maybe it's waiting an extra hour before responding to a provoking email, or sitting silently in a meeting instead of filling the air with unnecessary words. Even something as simple as pausing to breathe before reaching for your phone. Small gestures, but they train the muscle of restraint. And if you found value in these ancient lessons, consider joining us as we explore more Stoic wisdom, because in a world that never stops moving, learning to stand still is the ultimate edge.